machines are loud enough to swallow conversation, iron teeth bite cotton, wooden frames shudder, leather belts whip overhead, carrying motion from a hidden water wheel to every corner of the room. A man walks slowly through it all. His coat is clean, his hands are soft. He looks, at first glance, like any wealthy American tourist, just another curious visitor passing through Britain at the height of its industrial power. But he is not here to admire. He is here to remember. Every gear, every spindle, every ratio of motion, every mechanism that British law forbids him to copy. He cannot take notes, he cannot sketch diagrams. The guards would notice, the workers might talk. So he watches, counts rotations, traces motion in his mind, builds the machine piece by piece inside his skull. This is industrial espionage without paper, theft without evidence. When he finally leaves Britain, nothing will be found in his luggage, except the future. His name is Francis Cabot Lowell, and the world is about to change. Before he became an industrial pioneer, Lowell was a Boston merchant, born in 1775 into one of New England's most prominent families. Harvard-educated, sharply intelligent, and comfortable in the world of ships, trade routes, and global commerce. Boston's economy depended on the Atlantic, on goods moving, on stability, on peace. But in the early 1800s, stability vanished. The Napoleonic Wars convulsed European markets. British warships seized American cargo. The Embargo Act of 1807 choked the trade that men like Lowell had built their fortunes on. And when tensions finally erupted into the War of 1812, the fragility of American commerce was exposed for all to see. For Lowell, the lesson was unmistakable. America could not survive as a trading nation alone. If the United States wanted real economic independence, it needed to build, not just buy and sell. But there was a problem. Britain had already solved industrial manufacturing, and they had no intention of sharing the answer. By 1810, Britain dominated global textile production. At the center of that dominance was the power loom, a machine that transformed raw thread into finished cloth at a scale and speed the world had never seen. It was the engine of Britain's industrial empire, and it was treated like a military weapon. British law forbade the export of textile machinery. Skilled mechanics were barred from emigrating. Factory owners hired guards, posted warnings, and watched strangers with suspicion. The technology was locked behind walls of law and surveillance. But knowledge has one unavoidable weakness. It must be seen to be used. In 1810, Francis Cabot Lowell traveled to Britain, officially for his health, which tuberculosis had begun to erode. His doctors prescribed sea air and rest. His wife watched with quiet concern as he coughed through Boston winters. But Lowell did not sail for rest. He toured the textile heartland of Britain, Manchester, Lancashire, Glasgow, mill after mill, machine after machine. He asked polite questions, he smiled at factory owners, he presented himself as nothing more than a wealthy, curious American. And he watched. He studied the power loom, not as an engineer with blueprints, but as a trained merchant's mind breaking a system into its logic. He counted rotations. He traced the path of each thread. He measured motion with his eyes and filed every dimension away in memory. Where others saw noise, he heard patterns. Where others saw motion, he saw structure. And when he sailed home, after 2 years in Britain, customs agents found nothing in his luggage worth confiscating. The most valuable thing he carried was invisible. Back in Massachusetts, remembering a machine was not the same as building one. For that, Lowell needed a partner. He found him in Paul Moody, a mechanical genius from Newburyport, Massachusetts, with the rare ability to translate abstract ideas into working iron and wood. Where Lowell had vision and memory, Moody had hands and precision. Together in a small workshop, they began reconstructing the power loom. It was not a simple copy. There were gaps, missing details, mechanisms Lowell had observed but not fully understood. The machine had to be rediscovered, piece by piece, through failure and adjustment. Gears that didn't mesh, tensions that snapped thread, timing that produced tangled cloth instead of clean fabric. Then better, then nearly right. Then, in 1813, the shuttle flew clean. By 1814, 3 years after Lowell had stood quietly in a Lancashire mill, memorizing what the law said he could not take, they had built an American power loom. British law had tried to hold the Industrial Revolution inside Britain's borders. One man's memory had carried it across the Atlantic. But Lowell's vision extended far beyond a single machine. He was not trying to replicate Britain. He was trying to surpass it. In Waltham, Massachusetts, on the banks of the Charles River, Lowell and his partners, backed by a group of Boston investors who would become known as the Boston Associates, built something the world had genuinely never seen: a fully integrated textile mill. Before Waltham, textile production was fragmented. Spinning happened in one place, weaving in another, finishing somewhere else entirely. Goods moved between workshops, losing time and efficiency at every step. Lowell eliminated those steps. At the Boston Manufacturing Company in Waltham, raw cotton entered one end of a single building. Finished cloth came out the other. Carding, spinning, weaving, dyeing, finishing, all under one roof, all powered by a single water wheel, all coordinated as a single flowing system. It was efficient, it was scalable, and it worked. The Waltham mill turned a profit almost immediately. The Boston Associates, who had been cautious men of commerce, became true believers. The model was not just a factory, it was a blueprint. The system required labor. But Lowell had studied Britain's factories too carefully to simply copy what he saw there. British industrialization had drawn heavily on desperate urban workers, men, women, and children working punishing hours in brutal conditions. It was efficient. It was also a social catastrophe that alarmed even Britain's own observers. Lowell chose differently. He recruited young women from New England farms, daughters of farmers who might otherwise have had few economic options beyond domestic work or marriage. At Waltham, and later at the planned city his partners built in his name, these women lived in supervised company boarding houses, attended lectures, read circulating libraries, and earned wages most American women had never seen. They became known as the Lowell Mill Girls. The system was not without its contradictions. The hours were long, the rules were strict, the pace of the machines was relentless, and as competition intensified in later decades, conditions would worsen. But in its early years, the Lowell model represented something genuinely new in American industrial life. A factory system that at least attempted to address the human cost of mechanization, not just the mechanical output. The factory was no longer just a machine. It was a social architecture. Francis Cabot Lowell died in 1817, just 3 years after the Waltham Mill opened, at only 42 years old. Tuberculosis, the same illness that had given him the pretext for his fateful British journey, finally took him. He never saw the full consequences of what he had set in motion. But his partners did. In 1822, the Boston Associates purchased farmland at the confluence of the Merrimack and Concord rivers in northeastern Massachusetts. They did not simply build a larger mill there, they built a city. Canals were carved through the land to channel water power to dozens of mills. Housing, churches, schools, and boarding houses were laid out with deliberate precision alongside the factories. Infrastructure was designed to serve production and to sustain the workforce that ran it. It was the first planned industrial city in the United States, possibly in the world. They named it Lowell, and almost immediately, it became a template. Manchester, New Hampshire, Lawrence, Massachusetts, Holyoke, Paterson, New Jersey. Industrial cities across the Northeast rose on variations of the same model: centralized water power, integrated production, coordinated labor, and planned infrastructure. The Waltham-Lowell system had become America's default logic for manufacturing. What began with one man memorizing a machine became the foundation of American industrial power. The principles Lowell embedded at Waltham, integration, centralization, scale, did not stay in textiles. They migrated into steel, into railroads, into every industry that came to define American manufacturing through the 19th century and into the 20th. Control the entire process, centralize production, coordinate labor, scale relentlessly. This was the logic Andrew Carnegie applied to steel, the logic Henry Ford applied to automobiles, the logic that gave America the productive capacity to become the world's dominant industrial economy. It traced its lineage directly to a small workshop in Massachusetts, where a merchant and a mechanic had spent 3 years rebuilding a machine from memory. Industrialization always carries a cost. As the Lowell system expanded, competition increased, and the early idealism faded. Wages fell, hours stretched. The boarding house system that had once seemed benevolent became a mechanism of control. Workers began to organize. Strikes emerged. By the 1830s and 1840s, the mill girls of Lowell were no longer writing poetry in their spare hours. They were walking off factory floors, demanding shorter workdays and basic dignity. The tension between efficiency and humanity that Lowell had tried to manage would run through American industrial life for the next 100 years. It runs through it still. Lowell's model was not a perfect solution. It was a starting point. A powerful, flawed, genuinely transformative starting point. Progress rarely arrives clean. In 1810, a sick Boston merchant walked through a Lancashire mill and made a choice. He could have simply observed, filed the experience away as an interesting curiosity, returned home and continued in trade as he always had. Instead, he decided that what he saw in that British factory was the key to American economic independence. That his country could not compete on the world stage by selling goods made elsewhere. That the only path forward was to master and improve upon the machine that was reshaping the world. He memorized it, he rebuilt it, he integrated it into something more powerful than the original, and he designed the social and physical infrastructure to make it scale. That choice, made quietly without fanfare in the clatter and smoke of a foreign factory floor, planted the seed of American industrial civilization. Not a general, not a president, not a war. A merchant with a disciplined memory and a willingness to imagine what his country could become. Francis Cabot Lowell left Britain with nothing in his hands, but in his mind, he carried the blueprint of modern industry. He did not invent the power loom. He changed what it meant. He transformed a machine into a system into a model into a nation's industrial future. Today, when we speak of American manufacturing, of integrated supply chains, of planned industrial zones, of the productive power that helped win 2 world wars and reshape the global economy, we are speaking of something that traces its origin to a man who walked quietly through forbidden halls in 1810 and saw not what was there, but what could be built from it. One man, one memory, everything changed. Next on Pivot Points. Thomas Jefferson called it little short of madness. The federal government refused to fund it. Every engineer said it couldn't be done. 363 miles of canal cut through forest, swamp, and solid rock by men who had never built a canal before. DeWitt Clinton didn't ask for permission. He mortgaged the entire future of New York State on a ditch through the wilderness. And when it opened, the cost of shipping freight from Buffalo to New York City dropped 95% overnight. Clinton's ditch didn't just connect a state, it built America. DeWitt Clinton. Next on Pivot Points.